Of course, the difference between JsemTuNovej and JsemTuNovej is small, but I think very, very important. And that's the thing that really worked. And we were really surprised at how it took off. And actually, that's a very complicated place to work because there's a lot of difficult politics and a lot of criticism for almost everything that I did.
Hello to all listeners of the Začátek on Air podcast, this time in English. Coming to you from Kampusu Hybernská, we are your hosts, Helena Holubová
and Bára Kohoutová, and we are glad to have you. With us. For our very first English episode, we are joined by the most Czech Brit you could find. After traveling the world and gaining international experience, he had to learn words like řízek, watch pelíšky, and understand idioms like hogofogo to become the British ambassador of the Czech Republic he is now. His Excellency Matt Field is today's guest on Začátek on Air. Welcome and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much for having me.
How does someone who majored in Japanese studies end up as a diplomat in Czech Republic? Was it Svíčková that convinced you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have to say that I've never really had a great plan for my career. So it's not that I had a very clear idea of where I wanted to end up. I think what I've done is that I've followed the things that I found interesting. And I think it's that curiosity that led me to live in different countries, including Japan, Kenya, Sweden, and then to join our foreign service and work in places like Croatia and Brazil and Bosnia, and then find myself here in the Czech Republic. So it's a slightly accidental route, but a very happy one.
Do you get any chances to use your Japanese studies diploma or your religious studies major, since we are quite an atheist country?
Yeah, I think it's the role of religion, I think, in every country is always important and significant. So you don't have to be a country with a high level of sort of religious participation to be influenced by their history. And of course, this is the country of Jan Hus and other sort of religious icons, and it's had a big impact on Czech history. At the same time, you're right that this is certainly the European country, I think, with the lowest level of religious participation. But that's also interesting to me. So I studied these subjects because I found them interesting and still do. On Japanese studies, to be honest, my Japanese is a little rusty these days, but actually there's a lot of Japanese connections with the Czech Republic as well. So I still sometimes get the opportunity to use it, but not as much as before.
Is there a typical way how one becomes a diplomat? Since I think many of our listeners don't really know how to do that. And maybe since you said that your way was not really the typical one, what was your story of becoming a diplomat?
Yeah, sure. So I, through high school especially, I just followed what I thought was interesting, and then graduated and spent a gap year. It's quite common in the UK to spend a year between high school and university, and I spent mine as a volunteer teacher in Kenya, in very rural Kenya. So again, it was an adventure. It was something that I thought would give me a different experience, and it really did. Then I'd picked religious studies because it was the subject probably at school that I enjoyed the most and did best at, but I was always interested in other things as well. So even as a student, I was still doing student newspaper. I played university sports, a bit of student politics, just trying lots of different things. And I think that really helped me to find what I enjoyed and realize that it was the international side of life, particularly that I got a lot out of. So this is when I started to think about, well, what kind of career actually will allow you to work internationally, to learn different languages, live in different places, and to get paid whilst you're doing it. And it's actually, the list at the time wasn't very long, and becoming a diplomat was the thing that sort of appealed to me or occurred to me then. To be honest, though, I always thought that you had to be born a diplomat, so you had to be in some sort of noble family or to be prepared from birth for diplomacy. In actual fact, in the UK, anyone can apply to join our foreign service. They test for people skills, particularly negotiation, not particular languages or qualifications. And so I did the test and they liked what they saw. So I got to start this incredible career.
And is it common, like for people from different fields to end up in the service?
Yeah, I think it's more common with our service than with a lot of them. So some foreign services will almost exclusively recruit international relations students or lawyers. But the UK, we like a bit more variety. So I think of the people that I joined with, and you had all kinds of different backgrounds, including sort of science degrees, people who'd worked as journalists, people who'd worked in the development sector as well. So lots of different experiences. And I think that's probably healthy in terms of finding a way to get a good group of people that represents different parts of the UK. But the thing I think that really joined us together or qualified us for this career was that sense of curiosity. So wanting to understand and get to know the world. And if you have that, and I think it's what makes the best diplomats, I think that's really helpful. I see this also with the Czech Foreign Service. So I've met a couple of times, I've spoken to new groups of Czech diplomats. And I think you start to see a bit more diversity there as well. So different backgrounds, different experiences, which can only be a good thing.
Since you said you have a great interest in international life, and we know that you worked in Brazil, Bosnia, and now in Croatia, you mentioned Kenya. Are there any challenges to this life as well, working abroad, not being in your country?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's obviously upsides. There's positives about new countries, new experiences, but you are also spending a lot of time away from home, away from friends and from family. And I think you feel that distance, even now when you have such great either travel connections or you have the chance to speak with people, have video calls, keep in touch that way. It's still a bit distancing at times. And then the other part, of course, is that there's a personal side. So you're not just moving professionally, but you're moving, in my case, with a family. So with my wife, with our two boys. And I think there's lots of great experiences that they gain as a result of that, especially for children. But equally, it's a distance and it's a disconnect from the roots there. So the way it tends to work in our system is that you spend some time overseas and then you go back to the UK again for a while to help you reconnect and re-establish those relationships. So that's what I'll be doing after I'm in Prague, and I think that's probably about time.
If you could bring one thing from the UK along with you, what would you bring? Or have you managed to do that? Is there something you take with you and is British wherever you go?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think what I try to do is to, especially with my wife, we try to make home wherever we are. So we don't want to spend our time wishing we were somewhere else. So whether it was in Sarajevo or in Prague or in Brasilia, we wanted to create that feeling of home. And that means making sure that the children have lots of their things with us, that we turn it from a house into a home by having all those connections. But that's not just from the UK, that's also from our travels around the world. My wife is Croatian, so we're already sort of a multicultural family in the first place. So you want to bring all those connections together. At the same time, you do have to make the effort to kind of find those particular things that you miss from home. To be honest, there's not much you can't get in Prague that you could get in the UK. There's a few things. There's some foodstuffs that are unusual, so we bring those back with us. Marmite from the UK. Sometimes we bring olive oil back from Croatia. These are the things that we sort of treasure to kind of help us feel at home. But I think it's more a state of mind than a collection of objects. That's what helps us.
What was your first impression when you learned that your next destination would be Czech Republic? Delight
and excitement. So the way that it works in our system is that you apply for jobs. So we wanted to come here. We weren't the only ones. It's a very popular place to come, as you can imagine. So it was competitive. But when we found out that we were coming here, there was a real excitement. We thought it was going to be a fantastic experience. We'd visited Prague. We knew Prague. Didn't know the rest of the country so well. But this seemed to be a great place for us to be as a family. And I thought the job would be interesting as well. So because of the close relationship between the UK and the Czech Republic, its long history back to World War II, the things that we're doing together today to help Ukraine or in other areas, I thought the work would be interesting, and it's definitely been that.
Were there any stereotypes that you debunked or confirmed about Czech Republic or about Czech people?
So I think I'm always careful with stereotypes because, of course, they come quickly and easily, and they aren't necessarily the most useful thing because they stop you asking more questions. I think the most useful thing for me getting to know Czechs and this country has been to ask questions and to try to find out more, to get beyond those stereotypes. That said, there are some stereotypes which probably still feel true. Like us, Czechs love beer. Like us, I think there's a sense of humour that connects us as well, that makes it easy for Brits and Czechs to understand each other. And there's also a real history to that relationship. And I feel that every day in the job, and I feel very lucky because of it.
If there is one thing we believe that you have mastered really well, is Czech humor. You have previously said that Czech and British humor are similar. So I want to ask, in what ways?
Yeah, so I think it's humor is a hard thing to explain. And in my experience, when you have to explain the joke, it's not funny anymore. So explaining why Brits and Czechs understand each other's jokes is difficult, but I think you can put it in sort of very practical ways. Brits understand Yara Zimmerman, and there's a brilliant theatre production theatre company here in Prague that puts on Yara Zimmerman in English, and that might seem strange to a Czech because how do you translate this very Czech idea? But actually it translates very well into English also. So that for me is an example that it can be translated across. The same is true in the other direction. So you think of British shows, Red Dwarf, Yes Minister, Monty Python, and that is understood. The humour of it is understood here, and I think in a way that suggests that we have fundamentally very similar sense of humour.
If I think about being a diplomat, I don't really think about having to be funny, but I think it's a very big part of your job from what we see, at least online. And also you said that communication skills are very important to become a diplomat in your country. So do you view that as something very important, to be funny?
I think it's difficult to say that it's a compulsory part of the job. I think it helps to have good emotional intelligence. I think that is necessary. And I think with good emotional intelligence, with understanding other people and wanting to understand other people, maybe comes the sense of humour and the funny side as well. It's also, I think, part of the soft power side of the job. So soft power is a really present aspect of diplomacy, and soft power, of course, is really about the attractive quality of your culture. So the bits that don't involve force or money, that's what soft power is. And the UK has great soft power assets, and I think recently we were again placed as the sort of second strongest nation in terms of soft power. Now, those are things that a government representative like myself, I'm not directly responsible for. We're not the reason that English football or music is popular around the world, but sometimes you can take advantage of that and you can build on those soft power connections, and that's what I try to do.
How do you manage to be funny in a language that is not your native one and that you are still learning? Because you can be funny in Czech as well.
Well, I think you're being kind, but it's been about trying to understand Czech humour and listening to people and asking questions and getting people to explain things to me. And again, once I think you understand some of the language, you can already start to feel what's humorous or what's interesting about it. It's another reason why I think learning the language is so important. So yes, you can absolutely, there are technological tools, especially now for translation, which can really help and speed up your ability to read or to write in the language. But that's not the same as immersing yourself and trying to get your head around what's inside it. I'm a big believer that learning languages help you understand. That process of immersing yourself in a language gives you a much better appreciation of that culture and that country. That was definitely my experience in Japan, learning Japanese, the same in Brazil, learning Portuguese. And you benefit a lot more, I think, by starting to work in that language. It's rarely perfect, and Czech is a language that I'm still working on every day, and it's hard work. It's definitely a tough language, and I've got a long way to go, but I think it helps in that sense of connection.
When talking about culture, I think you seem to understand Czech culture really well. Do you have a tip how to do it, how to understand a foreign culture?
Again, that's kind. I think it's what I want to do. I have to keep working at it. There's still things absolutely every day that I don't quite understand. But if you're there with an openness and a curiosity, I think that helps. One of the things that I've learned to do from preparing for other postings is to really kind of throw yourself into lots of different aspects of the culture. So I've watched a lot of Czech films, get recommendations from people, watch Czech TV, listen to Czech radio a lot, Czech music, get recommendations from people as to what to read, and just spend time with Czechs as well. These are the kinds of things that help. But there's another side to it as well, which is that a lot of this depends on the reception that you receive. And since the very first day that I started my job as ambassador here, when I stepped off the 22 tram on Malostranské náměstí, I have felt that warm welcome, and it's the warm welcome then that creates that positive momentum that you can maintain. So yes, I'm interested, but also I'm getting lots of recommendations from people and getting lots of feedback, and that helps also.
When you came to Czech Republic, you launched a campaign, #JsemTuNovej, which resonated with many people. Do you think it's necessary for diplomats in this modern era to be active online?
Yeah, I think it's an expectation now, especially for every British ambassador around the world. You're expected to be using social media and other media tools as part of your work. In some ways, this isn't new. Ambassadors have always been influencers. That's always been part of our job, is to try to influence through the media or through other channels what's happening in the country that we're sent to. But the new tools give us different ways of doing it, and in a much more, I think, powerful way. So the fact that you are producing media, not just consuming it, but you're producing media, that you can do that unmediated. You can do it on the phone as you're going about your business through the course of the day. You're producing things and you're trying to deliver what is ultimately still the same set of goals to represent your country where you've been posted. And for me, that means trying to build a relationship between the UK and Czechia that benefits both of us, that makes us safer, more prosperous, that closer together. And social media is a tool within that. I will say, though, there are some challenges that go with that. So anyone who spends a significant amount of time on social media knows that there's an awful lot of hate and abuse that's out there. Now, as a straight white man, I receive a lot less than many of my colleagues, but I do feel that, and I think that pressure of being on the receiving end of particularly negative emotions, that absolutely is a challenge to deal with, and it's part of the dark side maybe of the media work that we do.
How do you deal with these hate comments, if you get any? Is there a way that you deal with them?
Again, it's a good question, and I don't have brilliant answers. I've had to learn to develop a thick skin. So this is my second time being ambassador. Previously, I was ambassador in Sarajevo. And actually, that's a very complicated place to work because there's a lot of difficult politics and a lot of criticism for almost everything that I did there. Someone would be unhappy about it. And so I learned to develop a bit of a thick skin. It's not easy. I do still take some of these things personally when someone says that you're the worst ambassador that the country has ever seen, or much more abusive and personal, and including comments about family. That's difficult to take. So I try not to spend too much time on the comments, especially the negative ones. I try not to go below the line and read comments on articles and things, just because the negative emotions always have a bigger impact than the positive ones. So it's not that all comments are negative, but the negative ones always sort of stay with. I'm also conscious that, as I say, I think others in public life suffer a great deal worse than I do, and that's one of the reasons why I'm particularly concerned about the impact of social media on people in public life, especially female colleagues who tend to get a lot worse. And I see little tastes of that sometimes in our work, and it's quite scary, the amount of abuse that some people have to put up with.
When it comes to the process of creating the content for your social media, how are you involved? Do you come up with ideas? Do you work in a team?
Yeah, so I'm lucky that there's a fantastic couple of people who work in the embassy, both Czechs, in our comms team. and everything we do is in conversation together. So I tend to be quite hands-on, especially in our comms work. It's not all of my job. It's probably only 10-15% of my job, but it's the most visible part of my job to the wider public. So I take it quite seriously and always want to be involved. At the same time, most of the good ideas don't come from me. Most of them come from colleagues. And this is where I think listening to advice and listening to ideas is the most powerful thing. There's no point in having great people work with you if you're not listening to them. So listening is part of that. And you mentioned the JsemTuNovej sort of hashtag. That absolutely was not my idea specifically. I wanted to come up with something that communicated that idea. I wanted to show that I was, right from the very first day, sort of enthusiastic, but also a bit informed about the country and ready to get stuck in, including to the language. And then when we put our heads together, one of my colleagues came up with the wording for it. And of course, the difference between JsemTuNovej and JsemTuNovej is small, but I think very, very important. And that's the thing that really worked. And we were really surprised at how it took off. But within the space of that week, I think that video had been viewed 2 million times. And then when you hear this phrase being used by the new chief of the Constitutional Court or the president of the country, this is quite something. It tells you that it's become much bigger than just us. And it's been great to see how it worked.
I feel like through social media, you can really connect with young people, and many Czech politicians and even like public figures really struggle with this because we have more like extreme parties out there on the social media more than the one on the normal spectrum, I would say. Do you have any main message you are trying to share with the people who are following you, because it will probably be mainly younger people, or have you put it up for yourself some kind of goal which you want to achieve through this?
Yeah, so there's some very good advice that I got about how to do especially social media, and it was from a former colleague. So he was an ambassador in Lebanon, and he was a one of our youngest ambassadors, and someone who early on, so more than 10 years ago, started to really think carefully about how we could use social media. And the three things that he sort of advised was that everything that you did on social media needed to be authentic, it needed to be engaging, and it needed to be purposeful. And if you have those three things, then I think it keeps you in the right kind of space. So why don't I just post cat videos all day? I mean, frankly, that's great. People like cats. I like cats. Those are popular, but there has to be a purpose to it. And this is why the purposeful bit is so important. Everything that we do in our media work has a purpose. And it comes back to that original objective of representing the UK and building a better relationship between the two countries. The focus might change. One day I might be giving a talk on a foreign policy issue, talking about heavy stuff like our support for Ukraine, or the need to tackle Russian disinformation or sabotage across Europe. Another day it might be something a bit lighter, making connections between Czech culture and British culture, but there's always a purpose to it. And I think as long as you have that purpose in mind, that's when you can have a positive impact. At the same time, I'm not a politician. So I'm not a political appointee. I'm a diplomat. I'm a guest in this country. And I should always be mindful of that responsibility. So when I engage with especially young people here, it's as the representative of the UK, I want to listen and understand the issues that they're facing, because it helps me do my job better. And it helps me think about what the UK-Czech relationship can deliver in the future. That's why I'm always interested in engaging with young people.
Even on social media, as you said, you are still a diplomat and you can talk about all sorts of different topics. But do you post mainly as yourself, or how much do you think about the UK's interests when you are creating content?
Yeah, so I'm always conscious that I am the ambassador of the UK. So it's never just personal. Even I might post something, say that is less directly professional. For example, if I'm traveling around, as I often am at the weekends with my family, we might post something from somewhere we're visiting. When we're doing sort of tourism around the country, exploring places. But I'm conscious that even then, I am still the British ambassador, 24/7, and so I need to approach that communication in the capacity and with the sort of dignity and seriousness for the role. At the same time, I think the human aspect is part of what makes it engaging. So if we were just to put things out in the name of the British Embassy, if we were just to share press releases and formal photos, I don't think people would find that as interesting. And I think we all have so much media coming into our phones and onto our screens that you have to earn people's attention. And part of doing that well, I think, is to be authentic. And so that kind of, again, that authentic, engaging, purposeful triangle I find very helpful.
Yeah, speaking about authentic, like a few days ago, you posted the stories from the Arctic Bakery. That made me feel so connected. That was so nice. Right. So I appreciate the mix.
And thank you. And it's not just for the pastry lovers, but it's genuine. It's genuine, and that's where I was at the start of the day, and it's something to share. I think if I spend too much time sharing pictures of food, that's probably a sign that I'm not getting the balance right. But no, I'm glad you enjoyed that.
It may seem to us that we see a lot of your work on social media, but of course there are some parts of it that we don't see. Could you share what a typical day of a diplomat looks like, if there is such a thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, with a difficult answer, because you're right, there are no typical days. So every day is different. It's one of the things that I love about my job, that there's always variety and lots of different challenges, and it keeps me fresh and energized. At the same time, there are some things that I do quite a lot. So I do spend quite a lot of time talking to colleagues inside the embassy and helping direct them, because of course I'm just one person in a much larger team. And most of that team in the British Embassy in Prague are Czechs. So the great majority of staff are not diplomats, they're Czechs. And that's how we deliver most of what we do here, is through our Czech colleagues. So part of my job is to work with them, to listen to them, and to help where I can help their work. I think there's also, of course, the kind of classic diplomacy of senior relationships. So thinking about the conversations and the meetings that I have with ministers, with business leaders, with journalists, with civil society activists, and always looking for concrete outcomes for that. So we don't just talk for the sake of it, but I'm always trying to find things that we can do together, or that we can keep moving forwards to the benefit of all our citizens. There's an aspect of the job that I love, which is when I get to travel around, especially the rest of the country, and get out of Prague. It's nothing against Prague, we're very happy here, but I'm not the ambassador only to Prague, I'm the ambassador to the whole country. And so this week I was in Svitavy visiting a school in connection to one of my youth advisors that I'd worked with last year. I was also in Pardubice talking to university students, meeting with the local political leadership. And this is an important part of the job, is getting out and about. And this year in particular, I've made a kind of private goal to travel more and spend more time getting around the country. And that's something I'm looking forward to.
After Brexit in 2020, voices in several EU countries have called for a similar exit. For example, in our case, it's Czechzit. Do you feel, or how do you feel about this, given your experience in working on negotiations regarding EU access in foreign countries, and also given the fact that Czech Republic is in EU and Britain is no longer there?
Yeah, Brexit was a big change, and we shouldn't pretend it wasn't. Leaving the EU was a complicated process, and it took a long time. And it's really only now in recent years that we're starting to see what this new relationship looks like. And actually, the good news, I think, is that the turbulent and challenging state of the world is making that relationship even better. So you're seeing, especially with the new government led by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, much closer contact between the EU and UK. There'll be a big summit next month that hopefully will lead to the agreement in areas like security and defence and trade. So there's positive dynamics there. I think discussions about leaving the EU, of course, Brexit was a sovereign democratic choice, and we don't only implement the decisions that we like in a democracy, we implement all of them. So this was the vote, it was a clear choice, and it was a clear result. So that's the reality, and I think this is why you're not going to see a British government talk about rejoining or anything like that for some time. But having a better relationship with the EU absolutely makes sense for us. And then for other countries, I mean, it's again a question of sovereign choice. I'd be surprised if there's many countries that, having looked at that complicated process, think that that's something to go through. I've seen a bit less of that, I think, probably in the last couple of years. And especially given the state of the world at the moment, these large institutions, organizations and alliances seem very relevant and important still.
You have been in Czech Republic for 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Has there been any change in the relationship between UK and Czechia since you came?
So I guess one way of thinking about my job is to say that my job is to leave the relationship between the UK and Czech Republic in better shape than I found it. I took over from a fantastic colleague, and a lot of things were clearly going very well. My job is to try to make it even better. And so I can look back over the last couple of years and definitely point to some major successes, some big trade deals, investments into the UK, but also investments into this country. There's a recent agreement between ČEZ, the Czech energy company, and Rolls-Royce to create a sort of new generation of nuclear small modular reactors. It might seem a bit strange that Rolls-Royce, I mean, if they're doing luxury cars, why are they suddenly doing nuclear energy? But actually, Rolls-Royce has been making nuclear engines for our submarines for a long time and is a great partner for this. So, that's the kind of project which is actually very transformational for both sides, because it's generations of technology development and energy, which is what we all need as well. So these are the kinds of projects that I really like. We've also had fantastic cooperation about Ukraine. And I think Czechs and Brits can be very proud of the way that we've responded from the very first day after Russia's full-blown invasion more than 3 years ago. I think we understood what was at risk, that Ukrainian security was our security, and so we can be very pleased about that cooperation. Recently, when there was a sort of coalition, the Willing meeting in London, you saw Prime Minister Fiala included in that small group, and that's important as well. So there's been some good successes there. And then lastly, I think about a lot of those cultural connections, which are also something that I love. So it's great to see Czech conductors of British institutions and orchestras. It's great to see British musicians here. I loved seeing Ed Sheeran playing in Hradec Králové. I loved being at Comic-Con last year with people from Red Dwarf and other shows that we love, and seeing how popular they are here. This is all part of the connection between our two countries, and much of that happens, of course, without me or the embassy needing to be directly involved, but we benefit from all of that.
And do you feel that you have changed during these 2 years? Has Czech Republic left a mark on you in some way?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, I feel much more at home here than I ever thought we would, just because when you're traveling around and coming into a new place, you can't assume that you'll be made to feel as welcome as we've been made to feel here. Prague feels like our home, Czech Republic feels like our home, and I think it will continue even after being the ambassador. It's going to be tough to leave. I'm not thinking about it too much right now. I'm halfway through my 4 years, but it will come, and I can already see that that's going to be a really tough departure. But I think the connection hopefully will remain. If
you don't mind sharing, have you experienced any faux pas during your time in Czech Republic?
Many, I'm sure. I don't know that I would consider them faux pas so much as just, when you make mistakes, you ask questions and you try to understand a bit better about what's going on and why you've got it wrong. But that's part of diplomacy. I think actually the most obvious kind of collection of mistakes would be learning Czech. So if you're worried about making a mistake, you just won't open your mouth. You won't ever speak, especially in a language like Czech where there's a lot to get wrong. So making mistakes in the language is a daily occurrence, but I think it's necessary if you want to learn and improve. And if you're willing to do that, and people have been very patient with me, then you can start to make progress.
By the way, we are still switching between Czech Republic and Czechia. Is there a diplomatically correct way to call our country, or is it like
interchangeable?
Yeah, so I always listen to the Czech, so I asked that question as well, and I think there's certainly a push from a number of colleagues here to use Czechia more internationally. I think we can. at the same time, Czech Republic still feels very natural to me and comes quickly and obviously reflects the Czech name of the country as well. So at least for the time being, I continue to mix and match.
And to finish off in like more Czech way, is there any Czech word you find the funniest?
Not so much a word as a sound. I mean, I live in kind of daily fear of the that is exactly is so difficult. But I think it's just one of those things that if you spend too much time thinking about it, you're never going to say a word that involves it. But I think it's a very particular part of Czech that I think is difficult. At the same time, when you do say a nice, as you mentioned earlier, Zizek or something like that, then it feels pretty good. So this is the thing that I think is most tricky.
Says Matt Field, today's guest of Celetná on Air. Thank you so much for making time for this interview.
Thanks for your time.
That is all from us today. Celetná is signing off. Thank you for listening. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on social media, and we will see you next week.